Hello and welcome to Jason's Macintosh Museum. I'm Jason, your host, and today we're looking at a Macintosh IIvi from 1992. Now at this point I'm sure a lot of you are saying, what's a Macintosh IIvi? I've heard of a Macintosh IIVX, but what's a IIvi? Well, let me explain. The Macintosh IIvi was launched alongside the Macintosh IIVX in late 1992, but the IIvi was designed as a slower, less expensive, even more cut-down version of the IIVX. But the IIvi in particular is unusual for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's one of the few models of Macintosh that was never actually sold in the United States. Not sure why that was, but it turns out it was never sold in the US. It was only sold in some other markets throughout the world, thankfully including Australia, which is why I have one. And as well, the IIvi, I believe, holds the record for being the shortest lived model of Macintosh in history, because the IIvi was launched in October of 1992 alongside the IIVX. But while the IIVX lasted for a year on the market, the IIvi only lasted for 4 months on the market, as it was discontinued in February of 1993. So it seems ridiculous that Apple would only have a model on the market for 4 months and then discontinue it, but that's exactly what they did. So in my view, I believe that makes this the shortest lived model of Macintosh ever. But I'm sure if I'm wrong, please let me know. Now, in terms of the differences between the IIvi and the IIVX, from the outside, very little is different. They both use the same case, they both use the same internal layout, and you can see that just like the IIVX, the IIvi also had the option of a built-in CD-ROM drive. The differences were mainly on the specifications, because whereas the IIVX used a 32 MHz Motorola 68030 CPU, the IIvi used a 16 MHz Motorola 68030 CPU. And in addition, the IIvi did not have any floating point unit, nor did it have any level 2 cache, both of which were features that the IIVX did have. But other than that, they both had the option of I think a 48 or 120 megabyte hard disk. They both had 4 megabytes of onboard memory, expandable up to 68 megabytes, and both had 3 NuBus expansion slots and a 030 processor direct slot. So, other than that, as I mentioned, the IIvi was introduced in October of 1992 and discontinued in February of 1993, and I believe the base price was somewhere around $2,500 US, but of course it was never sold in the US, so that's really an educated guess. I actually don't know what it cost in Australian dollars when it was launched. Maybe someone can tell me. But I would presume that it would have been a little bit cheaper than the comparable IIVX, because you didn't get as much for your money with the IIvi. So that's the basics on the Macintosh IIvi. And so what we'll do now is we'll have a closer look at it. Here is the front view of the Macintosh IIvi. And as I mentioned before, it's very much like the IIVX. So starting from the top, we have the Macintosh IIvi name tag. Across from that, we have the built-in 1.4 megabyte auto-inject SuperDrive. Then below that, we have the optional, focus, we have the optional double-speed caddy loading CD-ROM drive. So this one, just like the IIVX, has all the various logos here for CD digital audio, QuickTime, codec photo CD, and double speed operation. And then across from there we have the grill for the built-in speaker, reset and interrupt switches down here, And then across from that, we have the power LED. So that's the front of the Macintosh IIvi. Now we'll turn it around and have a look at the back. Here is the rear view of the Macintosh IIvi. So starting from the top, we have the case screw that you have to loosen in order to take the top panel or top cover off. And over here we have the power input and monitor power output ports. Here we have the exhaust grill for the power supply's cooling fan. Then over here we have the information label. But it is worth focus. It is interesting to note though that both my IIVX and IIvi have the same model number, M1350. And what's more puzzling is that, according to this label, as you can see, it was manufactured in May 1993, and yet the IIvi was discontinued in February of 1993. So I'm not sure why. It's possible at some point the back panel of this has actually been switched for that of a IIVX. Not entirely sure, because I know that the front panel is correct and the internals and the logic board are indeed from a IIvi, so not really sure what's going on there. So if anyone else has a IIvi, they can let me know what their serial number sticker looks like. That'd be good. Security cable lock there. The 3 NuBus expansion slot covers there. And then all the ports down here. Power switch there, which you can rotate to lock in the on position if you need to. Monitor out. SCSI. That would have been the blanking plate that would have had onboard Ethernet if this was, say, a Quadra or Centrus 650, because of course they use the same case. So we've got the printer and modem ports there, 2 ADB ports, audio out, and microphone in. So there's the back rear view of the IIvi. So what we'll do now is we'll take it apart. Taking a IIvi apart is in fact exactly the same procedure as taking apart a IIVX or a Centrus or Quadra 650 or in fact a PowerMac 7100, because they all use this type of case. But unlike the older Macintosh 2 models like the 2CX, 2CI and 2SI, you will need some tools in order to take this apart. So the first thing we'll do is take off the top cover. So we have to remove one screw, this screw just here. So we'll go ahead and take that apart, take that screw out. Well, actually we'll loosen the screw. It's a captive screw, so it won't come out all the way. But when it's loose, you can then push the top cover forwards until it stops and then lift up. So now that's the top cover along with the front panel off. So what we have here is we have the hard disk here, floppy drive here, power supply here, and the CD-ROM, if fitted, sits just underneath here, and the logic board down here. So what we'll do now is to take out the power supply. So we have to check first of all if there is a screw holding it in. You can see that this particular machine does not have a screw in this location. And if it did, we'd have to remove it. In this case, all we have to do is to pull up on the power supply, but there's a little tab that we have to bend out of the way, which is sitting just in there where my finger is pointing. So just push down on that tab to move it out of the way and pull up on the power supply and it comes straight out. And I should mention all of the models of Macintosh that use this case use the same power supply, so in fact the power supplies are interchangeable between all those different models. What we'll do now is to take out the hard disk. So we'll just unplug all the cables. And we'll do the same for the CD-ROM. Get it all out of the way. That's the CD audio cable there. I'll just unplug that to get it out of the way. So now, to take out the hard disk, we have to remove one screw here. And the drive you can lift up on the back of the drive to free it from its mount and pull it straight out. Then to take out the floppy drive, in a similar way we have a screw here that we have to remove. So that's now out. So we can now lift up on the back of the floppy drive and remove it, just like that. Next step is to take out the CD-ROM. To do that, we've got two tabs, one on either side of the drive. If you push in on these tabs while pulling forward on the drive, it should slide straight out. So push on those and pull. There we are. The CD-ROM drive is now out. What we'll do now is we'll disconnect all of the data and power cables down here for all the drives. So just carefully pull up on those. There we are. Now we can take out the bracket that holds the drives and the power supply. To do that, there are two screws to undo, one here and one over here. Then you can lift up on the front and then disengage the little hooks from their slots in the back of the case. Next step would be to, unplug the speaker, and you can remove the speaker if you want to. We don't have to here, but you just undo these four screws to pull the speaker out of the case. We'll remove the reset and interrupt switch assembly down here. Just lift up on this little tab, and then you can carefully pull the switches out. Now we have to take out the logic board. To do that, we have to remove one screw here. Now we can push the logic board forwards, and once it's loose we can lift it straight up and out of the system. You can also remove the little light pipe for the power LED. Just pull up on the back of it carefully, and then when the back is free, pull it back to remove it. And that's it. The machine is now disassembled. So what we'll do now is have a closer look at the components. Here is the logic board out of the Macintosh IIvi. So starting from the top, we have all the various ports up at the top here. There's the power switch. There's the digital to analog converter for the onboard video. There's the SCSI controller, serial port controllers. There's what they call the egret chip, I call it the CUDA chip. That's the chip that controls the real-time clock, PRAM and power on, power off circuitry. Don't know what the DFA-C chip is. You can see the board is very much like the IIviX board. The differences we'll come to as we move a bit further on. So there's the three NuBus expansion slots, the 030 processor direct slot next to it, the two ROM chips there, Here is the onboard memory, 4 megabytes. Next to that we have the two VRAM expansion slots, 68-pin modules for the onboard video memory. So you have to have modules installed in these slots for the onboard video to function, either two 256 kilobyte modules or two 512 meg modules. I think these ones are 512s by the looks of it. There's the onboard power supply connector there, the floppy controller there, decode, must be something to do with the memory addressing possibly. What else do we have? That's the NuBus controller there, battery holder there. There's the onboard SIM slots for main memory expansion. And over here is the main CPU. So this being a 2VI, you can see that the CPU is only clocked at 16 megahertz, not 32 megahertz. And notice there is no numeric coprocessor, although, as you can see, you can add one if you wish. So there's the clock crystals there, glue logic chip there, SCSI connector for the hard disk and CD-ROM drive, and the floppy connector there, power supply connector there. And notice this is where the cache memory would be if this were a 2VX. But you can see this being a 2VI does not have any level 2 cache. That's why there are no chips in that location. Power LED down there. Board identification, Apple Computer copyright 1992. Speaker connector, reset and interrupt switches there, NuBus bus transceivers there, and the 40 megahertz clock crystal for the NuBus system. Okay, so that is the logic board out of the Macintosh IIvi. So what we'll do now is have a look at the hard disk. Here is the hard disk out of the Macintosh IIvi, and I do believe this would have been the original disk that was shipped with the machine when it was new. So this is a Quantum ProDrive ELS, made in Japan. You can see that it's an original Apple 80 megabyte unit. So this drive has the standard 50-pin SCSI connector on it, which allows it to work with any model of Macintosh that supports 50-pin SCSI. And if we look at the underside, you can see the controller. So we have the part number and revision information there. There are the two termination resistors, and the rest of the control there. There are the SCSI ID jumpers, and ROM chip there, and that's about it. So that's the hard disk out of the IIvi. Now we'll look at the CD-ROM drive. Here is the CD-ROM drive out of the Macintosh IIvi. And as you can see, it looks very much like the same drive that was in the IIVX. In fact, I believe it is in fact an identical model. So from the top, we've got the standard laser product warning labels. The termination resistors up here for the SCSI bus, which of course are not fitted on this. And well, that's about all from the top. So if we look at the front, we can see that this one for some reason has tape over the headphone jack, volume control and activity LED. Not sure why that is, because when these drives are fitted into the IIVX or IIvi, this lower section is completely hidden from view. In fact, all you can see is the disk caddy loading slot. So I'm not sure why they did that, but see there is an eject button, but in fact if you push it, nothing actually happens. There's no physical button or switch behind there. So, but of course, this being a drive for use in a Mac you don't need an eject button, it's all done through software. So that's the front of the drive. So if we turn it around, look at the back, you can see we have the analog audio out connector, we've got the SCSI ID jumpers, and our parity as well. Not sure what this prevent/allow jumper is for. Now maybe someone can tell me that. It's can't really see the point of a jumper like that. SCSI connector there, and power there, and of course, as we found it in the 2VX video, the information label for the drive is actually on the bottom. So if we tip it up, we can see that this is the same model of drive as it was in the 2VX, which is a Sony CD-561, made in Japan. And this one was made in March of 1993. So it looks like the production date on the drive does match the production date on the label of the unit, on the back panel. So this being a 2VI though, it's a little bit, it's unusual that it was produced in March of 93 when the model was discontinued in February. Not sure why that was. Maybe they kept making them for a few more months after. Who knows? So that's the drive information there. So hopefully when we power up the 2VI, this CD-ROM will also work. I'm sure it will. Just have to find a CD caddy to use with it, of course, because you can't load a disc without one. So that concludes the first video on the Macintosh IIvi from 1992. So in the next video, we'll reassemble the 2VI, power it up, and of course, show a few old Mac games. Hopefully some CD-ROM based games, if I have any, and I think I do have a couple, so we'll give them a try. So, hope you enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and stay tuned as always for part 2.